Hello, Wellsprings. Happy Tuesday. It is November 9th. I'm a day behind. I blame it on the time change. But welcome to Tarot Tuesday. I was so excited to get to join you for a second week of tarot that I was having the hardest time deciding what to even do. There's so much to learn, and learning gets me excited. But I also want us to have fun, and so I decided to narrow our focus down for this Tarot Tuesday and dive in a little to the major arcana. I mentioned in our first Tarot Tuesday that the tarot is divided essentially, it's divided lots of ways, but into two major ways. So one is called the major arcana. Those are sort of like trump cards, although I don't like calling them that in these days. And then the minor arcana are made up of the suits. And the four suits in the tarot, again, you might remember I said, is what our current modern playing cards grew out of. And it's not that the major arcana are more important than the minor arcana, but because there's so many, and to have a place to start, I thought, you know what, we'll start with the major arcana. Not to be confused, though, that it's more important because of its name. But the major arcana are 22 cards, and I like to think of them as telling the story of the archetypal human experience. And so it begins with a card 0 that is the Fool. And so this is from the very first deck I ever bought, the deck called the Sharman Burke deck. Juliet Sharman Burke created this. And Juliet Sharman Burke has been studying and writing and practicing tarot, I think, longer than I've been alive, for like 50 years. And part of why I got her book, even though the deck is actually quite plain, is because a friend of mine had this, and I really loved the history of tarot that she included and the ways in which she guided learning the cards by weaving the major and minor arcana together. So if you're looking for not just a card that, or not just a deck that has cards with images that really appeal to you, but you want to appeal to that intellectual part of your brain, I recommend getting this. The history, again, is really fantastic. And so Sharman Burke, when she created her deck, really used more what's called traditional tarot images. And by traditional, I mean that grew out of the Victorian, Western European cards that were developed in the late 19th century, early 20th century. And she used a lot of Greek, like images from Greek mythology. And so her Fool is a young man setting off on a journey. And so you can think of the Fool as always being that prototypical person, no matter their gender, starting out in life. And so the Fool can represent literally a birth, right? Like here's a brand new human out in the world. It can also figuratively represent the birth of a new idea, a new adventure, a new career, a new, like anything new that you are embarking on. The rest of the major arcana then really represent different milestones on that Fool's journey. I should say, by the way, Fool often has a negative connotations in English, but Fool is also used to represent someone who is paradoxically wise, someone who is curious and open and able to see through the truth of things. If any of you have studied or watched or read anything about Shakespeare, Shakespeare often had, because this was the case in English courts, had a fool who was actually the one who really saw what was going on and was able to speak truth to power. And that is kind of what the Fool represents, the person who is able to, with openness and curiosity and clear-sightedness, begin a journey and then be in relationship. So this is the Fool's journey. And so as you start on your own tarot, you can think of yourself as being the Fool. And to know that that is a good thing. We all want to have a little bit of the Fool in us. The second of the cards then is the Magician. All right, I'm going to switch hands here. And the magician, if you think about the fool being on a journey, represents the knowledge and skills that you have inside you to get shit done. That's really what the magician is about, knowing that you are empowered and have magic in your hands and are able to wield it. And so the magician is the second part of the fool's journey, because as the fool is setting off, the fool needs to know that they are able to enact change on whatever journey they're taking. So that's the magician. I'm going to try to go through these quickly. I'm going to do them in groups next. So there's the fool setting off on the journey, the magician, and then the next two cards in the deck are the Empress. And here you see sort of a classic Greek image. Although were the Greeks really blonde? She sort of represents Demeter in this card deck. So an Empress and an Emperor on his throne. And the two of them represent archetypal male and female energy at their healthiest and in their most balanced. And so whenever these come up in a deck, and as the Fool again, if you think about Fool moving through life, knowing that they have their own power and are able to enact change, and that they can be in balance with all the different energies, the nurturing and I'll say dominant for lack of a better word at the moment. But that's the Emperor and the Empress, those energies that we want to have in balance. And they tend to be energies when they come up in a deck that are external. Like, how are you interacting with either someone who does have authority over you, someone who is nurturing you, or what are the ways that you might need to direct that kind of energy to others? The next two are about more internal processes. There is the High Priestess, who is often depicted as a woman holding, in this case, some flowers that represent knowledge, and then a Hierophant. And in some decks, I have more later decks, that old-fashioned term Hierophant has been, let me get this in the camera for you, as teacher or messenger. And the Hierophant really is about book learning sometimes. So the knowledge we can get by formal study, the knowledge we can gain in religion and philosophy and engaging with other people's knowledge and wisdom. The High Priestess is a balance to that says, yes, that is important. And there is also intuitive knowledge that is in nature and that is in our bodies, that balances and accompanies the book learning. And so as the Fool is learning on their journey, they are gaining knowledge of both kinds: intuitive, natural. Sometimes people use the term esoteric wisdom, and knowledge and wisdom of studying other people and of having a formal teacher. I have another image of the High Priestess from one of my favorite decks. This is my Next World Tarot, and I love this one of a High Priestess by the ocean, who again is tapping into all of that ancestral intuitive knowledge that we all need to embody. So the Hierophant and the High Priestess are about what we learn and how we grow on that side. And then there are the Lovers. And the Lovers can literally represent people that we love, romantically, platonically. If you think about your own journey in life, this Fool's journey we're all on, it's absolutely critical that we have healthy, thriving relationships. And this is often what the Lovers represents. Relationships that we nurture, that feed us. And again, they can be romantic or not. Love comes in all kinds of forms. Also, the Lovers card is very often about balance. there's a lot of balance that comes up in tarot, or being out of balance that we want to pay attention to. And so you can look at the Lover's card when you get that as literal. You are the people in your life on your Fool's journey that you are in relationship with, but also what are the areas of your life, either in relationship with people or yourself, that you maybe need balance or have balance that you want to keep building on. The next card, kind of in contrast to the Lovers, is the Chariot. And the Chariot, in this case, literally shows like a Roman chariot with two horses going wildly. The Chariot is sometimes represented as a warrior, or I was looking if I had another chariot out at the moment. I don't. But the Chariot is, as opposed to the Lover's card, which is about our relationships, the Chariot is about our strength and how we potentially need to fight battles, both literal and figurative, when we're on that journey. What do we need to strengthen ourselves? And how do we choose to use that strength? Because the next cards then are literally about justice, temperance, and strength. And so I often think of these three going together. Again, well, apparently never turned the phone on. So as we nurture and build relationships on our Fool's journey, as we figure out what battles we need to fight and how we need to fight them, we also need to weigh the needs of justice. And justice is the way justice so often appears in Western mythology and Western imagery, is holding scales. In one hand, justice has a sword in the other, and there is a wise owl next to her. It's about balance. So what are the needs of justice, and how do we make sure we are rendering justice to ourselves and to those with whom we're in relationships with, when we are indeed, going back to the Chariot, fighting a battle. Temperance then is, how do we temper justice, and how do we make sure that we are moving through our journey with the kind of moderation we sometimes need, the moderation that helps us to pace ourselves, the moderation that helps us to build up endurance, because we are in a marathon and not a sprint in this life. When the Temperance card comes up, it often lets me know that that might be a sign I need to take a step back, to take a deep breath, to look at things from a different perspective. And then Strength, and I love this, it shows a woman wrestling with a lion, but not hurting the lion, not killing the lion, but just holding the lion in a bit of stasis. And so this is about that there are all different kinds of strength, that we need to nurture physical strength, emotional strength, mental strength, spiritual strength, and we need to be cautious of how we wield that strength so that we are not doing harm. Strength. Halfway through the major arcana. The next major part leads us into like the second half of a Fool's journey. So the Fool has gone on their journey, encountered major milestones that have helped them to wield their own power in different ways, to study, to build relationships, and to think about Chariot, justice, temperance, strength, how they're wielding their power and moving through the world. And then we come to the Hermit, which asks us on our Fool's journey to be sure that while we are living out in the world and engaging in all of those relationships and that strength building and the battles we need, that we are also taking some time to reflect, some time alone, some centering time, in order to take in the lessons we have been learning on our journey. I'm a highly extroverted person, and so when I get the Hermit, which I actually do pretty frequently, I say to myself, okay, I hear you, subconscious. I need a little bit more time. to do some reflection by myself. After the Hermit is Wheel of Fortune. And the wheel, as it is here, shows different people at different stages of life circling a wheel. I really like this. Another image I have for it, though, is from my Darkwood Tarot, which shows a spinning wheel. Again, images from fairy tales are what is in this deck. And I think those were the only two I pulled out to show you. The Wheel of Fortune is about the fact that everything always is ending and beginning and ending and beginning, and that as we move through our lives, there will be multiple endings, multiple beginnings. I actually love this card. It brings me a ton of comfort. I used to reflect on it a lot after my grandmother's death. It comforted me to know that her life was continuing in some way, in some afterlife, that she may be valued, but also continuing in me. That's my engagement with this particular card. But the meaning really is about knowing that life's process is continually unfolding. The next few cards often startle people and make people a little uncomfortable when they come up in a deck, because as the wheel turns, it does bring us grief and sorrow, and that is part of life, and that's what the next few cards are about. There's the Hanged Man, someone who is literally hanging upside down. In my Next World Tarot, the way I love it is that it is described this way, because this is the meaning of that card, that we are in suspension. That sometimes we find ourselves in in-between states, and that's a hard place to be. But it's also just part of how things need to be. As things are ending, there is often a fallow time as we take stock and figure out where to go next. I use this card for the Hangman much more often, thinking about that I'm in suspension in my own actions, but that is a temporary state. So the Hangman is followed very closely then by Death. And in this image, it is a very stereotypical, death figure with a sickle reaping life. I have another image, though, from my Sasarabito deck, which is an image of a person transitioning. This one is a little more peaceful, a natural way to look at death. But death rarely in tarot represents a literal death. It always represents endings. Because again, it's following on the Wheel of Fortune, that the wheel is always turning, and that while we're in suspension, after suspension ends, an ending is taking place. An end of something we cherished, an end of an idea, an end of an era, whatever it might be. Death always means that there is change either coming or already underway. And then the Devil is a cautionary card, because the Devil says while all that change is happening, sometimes we're going to be tempted to give in to our less than healthy impulses. And so the Devil says, pay attention to that. It's not that pleasure or avoiding are bad things. It's that in too much they are bad things. And so what is it when the Devil comes up? Like when the Devil comes knocking, should you answer? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But this card is saying, as change happens, be aware also of how you are handling that change. And then when the change is happening, there is always a time of the Tower. And the Tower, while it looks terrifying, there's lightning hitting a tower, it's on fire, people are falling or jumping into the sea. Another image of the Tower that I like is of a tree, lightning hitting a tree. And so whether it's the literal tower or some figurative version of a tower, what the Tower stands for is the necessity when change happens of clearing away the clutter, of letting go of what does not serve us, and taking stock of the foundation that we have, that as that wheel keeps turning and as our fool we keep moving through life, that we know we have something new to build on, something strong to build on for the something new. The Tower is a powerful, powerful message to us about the need to make space and to clear away what we don't need, to lay down what is not ours. Just a few more cards in the major arcana and our Fool's Journey will be done. So, as we have dealt with change and its upheaval and are taking stock, then what we have is a little bit of clarity. And we have the star that is shining a bright light on our endeavors, on our state of being, and shining some hope into whatever the situation might be that we are encountering or are currently trying to build. Followed by the star, we have the moon, and we have the sun. And the moon and the sun, the moon is about being in touch with the energy that comes up at, metaphorically at night. And so knowing that even in darkness, there is a light shining. So whatever change is being wrought, there is hope shining through the stars and light even in the darkness. And then the sun is about joy and about embracing the goodness that is coming or that you are experiencing. This is one of the happiest cards. It's also, the sun can also tell us, hey, there's a whole lot of brightness going on right now. And is there something you're maybe not seeing because you are so blinded by the light? I always think of that. So the sun, though, is a positive force and is about the good that comes after and amidst change. And then the final two cards are Judgment and the World. And Judgment, it often is depicted as the very Judeo-Christian end of days, an angel resurrecting people with a bugle. And that for me is always a weird image. But it visually speaks to what Judgment is about, which is that there is always renewal that's going to happen. So Judgment isn't you're being judged and found wanting. Judgment is when things are fresh and new, you too can always be born anew. And I think that's great. I think that's a really powerful message. And the world is the culmination of the Fool's Journey. The world represents a completion of a cycle, but again, because the tarot is circular and that Wheel of Fortune is right there in the middle, the world is round, and it means there is always going to be a new turning, a new season arising from the old one. That, in holy crap, 22 minutes, everybody, were the 22 cards of the major arcana. Again, think of it like your own journey. You are the Fool, and that the cards represent people, places, events of your own life. And that as they come up in a spread for you, that they are intuitively tapping into some message that you might need about where you are on your journey and possibly where you might need to go next. I'm going to do a reading for us for an intention for the day, because again, I want to always leave us, even though we just looked at 22 cards. So I'm going to use my Next World Tarot, and then I'm going to sign off and let you all finish enjoying your lunch break or your dinner if you're watching this at night. Take a deep breath and center ourselves. I've been touching my cards all day, and there's so many that speak to me. Since I shuffled those. And here's what we have from my Next World Tarot, the Magician. So remember for the rest of your Tarot Tuesday that you have in your hands, in your body, and in your relationships and community, the tools and the resources that you need to do the work you need to do and to become the you are becoming. Be well, Wellsprings. I'll see you next week and we'll dive into the minor arcana. Thanks so much, folks. Bye.